I hope all of you are having a good day. Today, we're going to do the final section of monitoring and evaluation, advanced version on ethics. Okay, so this is the end. This is the last one that you're going to do on this. So my name is Dr. Gopalkrishnan. I live in USA in Silicon Valley, Bay Area. And I'm very grateful to Statistics Without Borders and CIDRA AIPD, African Institute for Professional Development, for giving us this opportunity to share our thoughts and our knowledge with you. I hope this has been useful. So, welcome to ethics. Are you like, why are we doing ethics? What has ethics got to do with the monitoring and evaluation? And it's big, it's very big. Okay, so what is ethics? We're going to talk about what is ethics, what is the role. We talk about the 3 steps in ethical thinking, and also the 5 principles, and then the conclusion, of course. So why do we do ethics? Why study it? But first, let's understand what are ethics also. So ethics are a set of values and beliefs that guide choices. Ethics is not legal or illegal, that's legality. Ethics is the values that you have. Somebody may have a value of not lying, even when lying will probably help somebody, what we call white lies, right? That could be an ethic, that could be a value. Somebody could have a belief that people who work hard should be rewarded, okay? Whatever, it could be any belief or value that you have, that's yours. It's very personal. It's not like the company has one, it's not that the donor has one, it's your values and beliefs. So be very careful when you're doing ethics, it's about your values and your beliefs. So what happens in evaluation and monitoring? How would you get into a situation where you will have an issue? So sometimes you could have this problem of when you want to twist the truth so that you can positive findings, okay? So the whole idea of good monitoring and evaluation is let the data tell us what it is. When you're interviewing people, when you're collecting survey data, whatever it is, that is what you report. You do not say, oh no, because of this, no, therefore it should be this. No, it is just your job is to just report as it is, okay? So sometimes people are willing to twist the truth to find positive findings. It could be conflict of interest, or it could be somebody's giving them penalties if you don't achieve this, or there could be payoff. Somebody say, hey, do this, then we can give you some more money. Sometimes it's just because your unprofessional evaluation practices, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't do a control system, it's fine, I'll just tell them it's fine. Sometimes it's your own prejudices or preconceived notions, like for hundreds of years it was, oh, women cannot do this or can do this. That can be a preconceived notion, and therefore that can actually corrupt the answers. Or you tell everybody, hey, listen, we're going to do this. You tell the donor, you tell the participants, but you know it cannot be kept. So that's also a corruption happening. And if you don't honor commitments. So in evaluation, a lot of this happens almost on a daily basis. And it's your job continuously to check that none of these are being checked. It's not like a checkbox and say, okay, all this is fine. It is being continuously aware of what you're doing. So sometimes people say, no, listen, I'm very ethical, I do all the right things, I won't hurt anybody. But then they come up with these things. Oh, no, the client has told us, therefore we're doing it. Okay. So whatever the client is saying, that's not true. That's not true. Remember that, it's not correct. And each of us individuals does our part in doing the right thing, then the world becomes a better place. Then we know whether, hey, this intervention works or not, or should we just keep putting money on something that does not work? So you don't have to listen to the client. The client is hiring you as an M&E expert because they want a truth. Then there's this idea of contractualism, that you must follow the written contract. Okay, so that's another big issue. Then you're like, no, I did this method. Only this method will give me the right answer, will be ethical. Okay, so you have to, sometimes that is a fallacy that we come up. Relativism, that opinion data they collect from various people must be given equal weight. Maybe, maybe you're doing it for women, and maybe there are a couple of men, and you're like, no, I'll give everyone equal weight. But the whole idea was you're doing it for women, so you don't do that. Okay? And then there is elitism, that the so-called higher hierarchy gets higher priority. But that's not true. All of us are equal. All of us are born equal. And then we cannot say because my boss said so, because they said so, that they will do that. So these are the fallacies we have to be very, very careful about. What are the stakeholder problems? Okay. Sometimes what happens is the stakeholder decide, oh, this is how it's going to happen. Okay. Or, oh, whatever the results are, I am going to use it so that it'll benefit me. Okay, so sometimes that happens. Sometimes people may say, oh, no, you cannot ask this, it's culturally not right, or, this thing, or some kind of issue like that. Don't talk about this. Like FGM, no, you can't talk about it because, it's culturally inappropriate. But then maybe it is the health of a woman, right? So that could be very relevant. Sometimes the stakeholder will actually change the findings before the release. You've done a great job, but they'll change it. So that's why you have to be careful. Sometimes you will be pressured, and this will happen more often than you think, to change the findings. Like, come on, you understand, under the circumstances, you're a friend. Come on, you're a brother. Come, let's do this, right? Sometimes they're suppressed. Sometimes they're like, okay, it's okay, just violate confidentiality. Nothing's going to happen. And legitimate stakeholders are omitted. So these are stakeholder problems which can also happen. Okay, now all this is being taken from Morris and Cohn in 1993, but it's very, very true even today. What other problems can happen? You, as an evaluator, have found that there is illegal or unethical things happening, and you have to take care of that. Sometimes you can get the full findings, but they don't want you to present it. You sometimes, you yourself are like, oh God, am I not good enough? Maybe I'm not great. That's what this is happening. Or sometimes you'll actually say, oh, I'm going to do this because now I can punish somebody. So there are many, many, many problems which happen ethically. So we talked about how corruption can happen slowly. It can be very tiny, tiny. It can be fallacies. Talking about clientism, which becomes very, very important. Stakeholder problems and other problems. Now, the basic thing in M&E ethics is do no harm to participants. That should be your main basic thing. You don't say, oh, listen, I'll do a little bit, it's okay because for the greater good. No, you do not harm participants. That is your big mantra that you have to carry. So now we're going to take it a little differently, and we'll talk about the 3 steps that good professionals follow. Okay. So first is to recognize our responsibility. So remember, in M&E, you have a very powerful role, and you have to do that ethically. With more power comes more responsibility. So you have to be very, very, very careful about how you recognize your own responsibility. Say, no, I'm just a cog in the wheel. I'm just doing a little bit of job. No. You have to recognize your role. It's very powerful. Then there are guiding principles. Now, we are going to use the AEA, but I will also, at the end of the session give you access to all the other guiding principles. There's Africa, Australia, and Canadian, and all the others. So depending on whichever way you are, whichever country you're thing you are doing, you can use those guiding principles. And how do we use our ethical standards? So the three things. One is you recognize your responsibilities, that you have power to do good, to be ethical. Second is use your guiding principles, and then use the actual ethical standards. So let's talk about recognizing our responsibility. A big thing today is like, oh my God, statistics, everyone loves statistics. Oh, it's objective, it's data, it's this, collect data all the time. So that becomes a huge amount of things. Everybody is sitting and collecting, data all the time, and you're like, let's get some data. But if you keep serving the control group, they are getting nothing. They're not getting no benefit out of it. Okay? Yet you need it for, causation and all those other fun things. But there is a limit to what you can survey. Okay, so you have to be very, very careful about that. Sometimes people just remove your limitations. They're like, yeah, that's okay. They don't need to know. They're just interested in this. So recognize that's also a responsibility. What is a local culture? Okay, you have to understand that and recognize that. So these are some things when you do recognize the responsibilities. Okay? So that's our first thing. First thing we talk about recognize. These are just some examples. I'm sure you can think of some of this. So what are the 5 principles of AE? Like I said, a lot of countries have their own guiding principles, and you can follow that. This is just an example, and I'll give you links to the others. Okay? So these are 5 principles. They are saying do a systematic job, a systematic inquiry. Okay. Don't say, oh, haphazard, yeah, I'll do this, and then I do this, and then I forget to do this. But do it systematically. It's like we've shown you in all the other sessions. Competence. They expect that whoever is doing this is competent. Okay? You've done a course, you've got some experience, you work with somebody else who's done this, and you're competent. They expect integrity and honesty, right? Respect for people, and looking after the public welfare. So now we'll go into each of these in great detail. So remember, we're in step 2. Let's go back again. Step 1 is recognizing our responsibilities, which we've talked about. Step 2 is guiding principles, and these are our principles. It has to be systematically done. There should be a competent person doing it. It has to have integrity and honesty, respect for people, and responsibility. So systematic inquiry, what does that mean? You acknowledge that there'll be bias, and you make all your efforts to the best of your ability to remove it. You have to make sure they're systematic, accurate, and fair. Okay, so first go through all the steps as you've learned. Make sure it's accurate and it's fair. So that's systematic inquiry. Whatever method you're doing, make sure all stakeholders know it and give them an opportunity to critique it. You're like, what is good? What is bad? What are things that can be improved? The more people you involve, the more robust and better your M&E is going to be. I know you are like, oh, no, I'm the expert. I know what, how to do M&E. These people don't know. And that's fine. You are the expert. But tell them, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a control group. I'm going to have you. I'm going to give you these things. These people won't be given. And then we're going to compare it. This is a method. We're interviewing people. Let's say, suppose you say, okay, I want to interview children and see whether that free food helps or not in school. And so you have to be, and you're like, great. But then they'll say, should the parents be involved when you're asking children? Because, children will try to please you and give you answers. Or some adult be involved. So they can have their own issues, which you because you're not in that situation, you never even think about that. Okay? Be open to say, hey, listen, this is good or bad. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? This, In this step, you have to really be rigorous, and you have to acknowledge that it's absolutely okay to not be perfect, but I'm be willing to open my mind and listen to things. So here's an example. Take a minute, read it, and think of the question and answer it. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes. Sit down and think. Okay, so what does it say? Your organization is a member of Food Security Consortium. NGO 4 is responsible for leading the baseline survey and proposes to collect data in the least secure communities. You're concerned that they'll bias the sample to demonstrate greater food insecurity. Other NGOs also support the strategy and want to do everything to secure resources. Some have hinted that this will only increase the project impact in the end. So, what did you think? Should you support NGO 4? When will you oppose this? Finally, remember, they'll say, listen, we are trying to do good to people. So if I take the extreme, people who are in extreme food insecurity, it'll show the need is so much greater. Okay, that's up to you. No, I'm not going to give you answers for any of this. This is up to you for you to think. The more you think about these things, the more better you'll get at facing situations when it happens in real life. Okay. Should you allow them to bias it, because then you'll get the funds? Otherwise, if you do an unbiased report, maybe you won't be able to get funds. Is that okay? What is making you do that? Or the other way around, you're like, should I not be unbiased? And then will you feel bad that there are so many people who probably could have found resources but could not? So these are not easy questions. This is questions where you have to look at your own values, your beliefs, and say, what is it that I really believe? You know, if there's bias, is obviously not a good systematic inquiry. So think about it, reflect, write down some ideas, talk to other people. What do they think? What are the pros and cons? And follow your beliefs. So the next principle, competence. Do not undertake an activity if other stakeholders did not approve of your past work, right? And always improve your skills and competence through technical trainings. You're like, okay, I have done this, I'm good, I can do this, but it's never ending. You know, every new day, new things come up and new ideas come up and we don't know. Okay, so make sure you are responsible for being competent in what you're doing and not say, okay, somebody's giving me something, they must believe I'm good. So you evaluate yourself and you decide whether that's good or not. So here's an example. Again, take a minute and read this and think of the question. I'll give you a couple of minutes. So you have serious doubts that there's enough time to conduct a survey and analyze the data and present at donor conference. Because evaluation is still at planning stage and you're like, oh my God, this is happening right. Your supervisor suggests that you don't have a 4-day training for the data collection teams, saying that the data collection teams have all conducted surveys and do not need training. When would you agree? Are there any other typical activities that would be omitted instead of training? What do you think? What was your idea? Do you agree with the supervisor? Think through, is the data collection exactly the same as before? Is it the same geography, same people? If it's then the data is there, then you don't need to worry about it. But if it's different, there are nuances. Think about that. What other activities could be omitted, you think? Could we wait for another conference? So be very clear. Somebody can say, hey, maybe I can hire more people. I can crunch resources in that sense. Do you have the resources? So think about that. This is another example where you can actually think about these things. Okay, the third principle is integrity and honesty. So here you have to be very clear on if there's any potential conflicts of interest. Okay, you have to be clear and you have to state it. You have to honor agreements with stakeholders. You would have said, hey, listen, I'm going to give each, say, person in the job will get training so that they can get a job. You have to make sure that you honor that agreement. You can't say, oh, something happened, I can't do this now. No, that's very, very important. If you don't have enough resources to get data and results, don't say, oh no, but something has to be done, therefore I do. Okay, so do not do an M&E when you have to, when you make sure that the data are accurate. Okay, and do different methods. You can ask different people to triangulate, collect data from 2 different sources on the same thing. And also, of course, make sure you represent things accurately. So integrity and honesty, we all across the world, whatever happens, this is important. So again, take a minute, read this. So an organization that works in many of the same communities as your agency presented high success rates from the education activities. You believe the project was successful because they collected informal feedback, but not enough data. The donors are very impressed and they are wanting to expand the project team. What questions should be raised during this discussion? What did you think of? What kind of questions should you raise? Should you talk about adequate data? Should you talk about coverage? Or should you say no? Hey, the donors are impressed. This is success. High five. This is great. What is it that you should do? And what happens? So in all these things, what happens if you don't do what you believe, what you do which reflects your values? What do you think is going to happen? The ramifications, right? The ramifications of future, and you'll come back, and then sometimes these are little things which add up and then suddenly blow up, and you're like, oh, why didn't people just see that? That was a tiny thing. They could just have had a discussion. And you're like, no, but it'll set things back, we'll have problems, and there are other pressures coming. That's okay. That is not your job. Your job is in being monitoring and evaluation and checking those. Sometimes you literally have to put earplugs and not listen to all the others, even in your own head. Respect for people. Now, this is very, very, very critical, and especially in the AEA, they're very, very, very particular. You cannot ask people to be participants without taking their consent. And consent is not like, hey, come sign, whatever happens, I'm a good person, I'm do it. No. You have to sit down and explain to them what you're trying to do. Even if it's for what you think it's for their benefit, may not be. So respect that everyone has their own agency, that they can decide what's good or bad for them. You cannot decide for them. Okay, you're not their father or mother, they're not underage. So please do that. Make sure there's confidentiality and anonymity. So you have to decide what is possible. Ideally, everything should be anonymous. You should not know who's giving what data. But sometimes, especially if you want to see how things have grown over time, so you're like, this person was given money or intervention, and after 6 months, I want to see the same person. I don't want to see another person. So you need to know. So one easy way is to put a number on it and then make sure the same number goes there, right? So in confidentiality, only you should have access to that thing and others should not. So understand, anonymous means no one knows, even you don't know. Confidentiality, you or maybe one or two other people may know who the person is, but it cannot be public. Again, minimize harm. So here's another example. Take a minute, read it. Okay, so the question here is, your organization recently expanded programming into the eastern part of the country. Local leaders expressed frustration at repeated time-consuming surveys in the past that did not result in any changes for the community. You had planned to conduct a survey, oh no, in the next month. But this is planting season, households are very busy. Do you think if you give an incentive for participation, it's appropriate? What do you think? Are you respecting their time, their work? You'll say, oh, I'm going to give you extra money, and they were like, oh, can we do that? What did you think? What did you come up with? Try and put yourself in their shoes and see what it feels like. What is the impact of not doing your work, but actually filling out a survey? Again, I'm not going to give any right answers or wrong answers. They're none. They're just your values and your beliefs. But please be ethical about this. The last thing is gender and public welfare responsibilities. Okay, so when you're thinking about the public welfare, you have to make sure that you are you're giving a balance which is not biased. It's not like, yes, this is so great, fantastic. Okay. Always have a limitation section. Okay. And if there's something that didn't work out the way we wanted it to, put that. That is integrity. That is showing us that we are being unbiased. Have a non-disclosure policy. And make sure that you don't write the paper in such a way that people cannot read it, understand it, but everybody, all the stakeholders have access to it. So here's an example. Again, let's read this. Take a few minutes and then. Okay, so here they're saying they did focus groups with orphans and children, and with children who are not orphans. And where stigma towards HIV/AIDS exists, but it's declining. You are concerned that OVC would be stigmatized if they participate in an OVC focus groups. But you want that data. critical for your thing. So what are creative ways to collect OVC information without risking stigmatization? So what did you come up with? What ideas did you come up with? That'd be very fascinating. So a lot of ethics can be use creative methods to sit down and figure out, how to go over this issue, whatever issue that you're facing, and still be ethical. Okay, this is another big part. So the next step is you review the guidelines. Okay, so again, let's go back to what okay, so we recognize our responsibility. We know we have the power to do good, but do it ethically. We talked about the 5 guiding principles for evaluators, and now the last one is we are going to use ethical standards. Okay. We talked about all these 5 things. So again, whenever you are not sure there's an ethical issue, talk to other stakeholders, get them, invite them, tell them that the issues are, like we talk about these 5 examples. You can put this and say, what do you think? What do you think? Talk about each person's role and how do you communicate this, right? Again, control groups, be careful, that because obviously you're not giving them intervention. What is the ethics for that? And then have a discussion. So these are things very important. So now you'll say, okay, this is all very nice. You can just tell me, have a discussion, but what do I ask? What do I say? How do I do it? So when you're doing the review guidelines, you have to think through these 6 questions. How am I setting the tone for them in event? Are the stakeholders aware of the AE guiding principles? What are the problems I might encounter? Okay, so you should spend hours and hours on thinking through all these things. What kind of problems can happen? Are the stakeholders familiar with the AE? If they're not, should I train them? Should I talk to them about it? Are there principles which are relevant for this work? Go look at other case studies. Have people done things here in the past? What there are case studies who have faced a similar ethical challenge? And there'll be lots and lots and lots of these. So you can look at that to help you think and reflect more. If an ethical conflict occurs, how do I make sure there's conversation? Because remember, this can just go up very fast in flames, like, oh my God, then there'll be a big conflict and people will start fighting. So how do you make sure that you differentiate between ethical conflicts and conflicts because of value and culture? It's very, very, very fine line. So think through this, write down the answers. If you're right now helping somebody with M&E, see how they do it. It's always nice to have some colleagues whom you look up to, who you really believe is very ethical. It's not their senior or whatever, they're very ethical. Try and talk to them. If you don't know of any, try and talk to somebody who has a different view, right? Don't talk to your friends and say, of course, yes, what you're saying is right. Try to somebody with an opposite viewpoint, because if you do that, then you're likely to get more ideas and more thoughts about what can happen. How will my standards, my ethics influence my work? Okay. How do I make sure that the stakeholders, the participants feel comfortable talking to me if they have ethical issues? How do I do that? If you're not a person who likes conflicts, try and get somebody else who can handle that. Like, I love conflict, so people put me in front for conflict. Yes, talk to somebody. Okay, because if you cannot handle conflict, this is hard. This is going to be hard. So these are some guidelines that the EA have actually put down, and you can actually help these to make yourself a better ethical manager. And the last step is use ethical standards. Okay, so you do it in the planning phase. And you write down, okay, this is what I'm thinking. So thinking, again, it's a lot of thinking, a lot of talking. And the more experience you have, you're like, okay, this has probably come up. So read a lot of case studies. Then worry about the program evaluation standards, okay? And the evaluation standards, you should talk about utility. Is it feasible, accurate, and proprietary? Okay, so those are those things. So what is in this order you actually put them in, okay? Now this was a joint committee on standards in 1994. So what are the proprietary standards? The proprietary standards, one is service orientation. So that you serve a range of targeted parts. You're like, oh no, only my village, my culture, my thing. No, across the thing. Have formal agreements on evaluation agreements. Make sure you have an agreement saying so that you can follow that. What are the rights of human subjects? Remember, there's informed consent, there's anonymity, confidentiality, do no harm. When all your human interactions, make sure there is no harm done. Another thing you have to be very careful about, that you do a complete and fair assessment. If these are proprietary standards. You disclose all findings. You don't say, oh no, I'm only going to say the good ones or the bad ones. Bad ones because, oh yeah, that make them look so bad, or because that person who's doing it, I don't like him or her. Or you're like, no, I'll go show good ones because then the donor will like it so much. So make sure you disclose all. Just collect the data, do a very systematic thing. Whatever happens, whatever they fall, you just do that. Think about conflict of interest. If there is any, walk away, say, hey, listen, I have a conflict of interest. I'm not going to do this. And be careful with the money. Now, all these slides from after the Morris ones are all from Clara Haggins. I want you to put this. I'd mentioned earlier that we'll talk about science across the group. So you can actually click on each of these and you can see this is for Europe. This is Australia. This is Canada. United Nations has one. Africa has one. German, Italian. So look at all of these and, use the right one that's appropriate for you. So what is the conclusion? When you do M&E, keep ethics at the center. Always, always, always. Think of the 3 steps we talked about. Recognize your own responsibility, use a guiding principle, and actually using ethical standards. And think of the 5 principles. Systematic inquiry, integrity, honesty, competence, make sure you're competent, public awareness, and respect for people. Okay, it's very, very important. So congratulations, you've finished this entire modules for M&E expert, and good luck in all your career, and keep ethics at the center. That's very, very important. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I wish good things for you and your career. Goodbye.